Lord Alexander Blackwood, the Duke of Thornfield, stood at the tall windows of his London townhouse, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. The grey skies matched his mood as he contemplated the letter in his hand, an invitation to yet another social event where ambitious mothers would parade their daughters before him like prized mares at auction. At 32, Alexander had long been considered the most eligible bachelor in England. Wealthy, titled and blessed with the striking Blackwood features, he was the subject of countless matrimonial schemes. Yet he had sworn never to marry, never to love. Love had destroyed his parents, his father dying of a broken heart after his mother's betrayal, and Alexander had vowed not to fall victim to the same weakness. A discreet knock interrupted his brooding. "Your Grace," his butler announced, "Lady Helena Winters requests an urgent audience." Alexander frowned. His godmother rarely called without notice. "Show her in." Lady Helena swept into the room moments later, her normally composed features strained with worry. "Alexander, I need your help," she said without preamble. "It's about Catherine." Catherine Winters was Lady Helena's niece, a quiet, bookish girl Alexander vaguely recalled meeting at social gatherings. He remembered little about her, except her unusual violet eyes and her tendency to hide in library corners during balls. "What about her?" he asked, gesturing for his godmother to sit. Lady Helena twisted her gloved hands in her lap. "She's been ruined, Alexander, absolutely ruined, and through no fault of her own." The story tumbled out rapidly. Catherine had been serving as a companion to elderly Lady Hargrove. Lord Hargrove's son, James, had cornered Catherine in the library, attempted to force himself upon her, and when she fought him off, had torn her dress and then claimed she had been the aggressor, throwing herself at him shamelessly. "Lady Hargrove believes her son, of course," Lady Helena continued bitterly. "Catherine was dismissed without references. Worse, James Hargrove has been spreading vicious lies throughout society. No respectable household will hire her now." Alexander's jaw tightened. James Hargrove had a reputation as a libertine, though his family's wealth and connections had always protected him from consequences. "This is certainly unfortunate," he said carefully, "but I fail to see how I can help." Lady Helena fixed him with a piercing stare. "You are the Duke of Thornfield. Your word carries more weight than anyone's in society. If you were to show Catherine support publicly, it would silence the worst of the gossip." "And how do you suggest I do that?" he asked, though he already suspected her answer. "Marry her." Alexander's laugh was sharp and without humor. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious," Lady Helena replied, her voice steady. "It need not be a real marriage, a marriage in name only to protect her reputation. After a suitable period, a year, perhaps 2, you could arrange an annulment or quiet separation. Catherine could live at one of your country properties with a generous allowance." "And what would I gain from this arrangement?" Alexander asked. Coldly, Lady Helena's eyes flashed. "The knowledge that you saved an innocent young woman from ruin. The satisfaction of thwarting a predator like James Hargrove. And perhaps," she added softly, "the chance to honor your father's memory by showing the kindness he was known for." The mention of his father struck a painful chord. Alexander turned back to the window, struggling to maintain his impassive expression. "Where is she now?" he asked finally. "At my home. She has nowhere else to go." "Bring her here tomorrow," he said after a long pause. "I will speak with her before making any decision." After Lady Helena departed, Alexander poured himself a generous brandy. Had he just agreed to consider marrying a woman he barely knew? The idea was preposterous. Yet the thought of James Hargrove escaping consequences while an innocent woman suffered stirred something in him, a sense of injustice he couldn't ignore. The following afternoon found Alexander pacing his study, When Catherine Winters was announced, he steeled himself for tears, pleading, perhaps even a display of gratitude for merely considering her godmother's outrageous proposal. What he didn't expect was the composed young woman who entered his study. Dressed in a simple grey gown, her chestnut hair neatly arranged, she offered a perfect curtsy before meeting his gaze directly. Her violet eyes, the feature he remembered most clearly, showed no hint of tears despite the dark shadows beneath them. "Your Grace," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I understand my aunt has approached you with a rather unconventional proposal. I want you to know I did not ask her to do so." Alexander studied her with surprise. "You disapprove of her?" "Plan, I think it unfair to you," she replied frankly. "Why should you sacrifice your freedom to salvage my reputation?" Her candor was refreshing after years of simpering debutantes. "Sit down, Miss Winters," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Let us speak plainly." Catherine took the offered seat, her posture straight, but her hands tightly clasped in her lap, the only sign of her nervousness. "Tell me what happened with James Hargrove," Alexander said. "The truth, not the version your aunt believes." "My aunt told you the truth," Catherine answered without hesitation. "Lord Hargrove's son cornered me in the library. When I rejected his advances, he became violent. I managed to escape, but not before—" She paused, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "Not before he tore my dress and marked my arm." She pulled up her sleeve slightly to reveal a fading bruise. "And now you find yourself ruined by gossip and without prospects," Alexander concluded. "Yes," she admitted, "but that doesn't make it your problem to solve." Alexander was silent for a moment, struck by her dignity in such circumstances. Many women would have collapsed under such injustice, yet she faced it with remarkable composure. "What if I told you I am considering your aunt's proposal?" he asked, curious about her reaction. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "Then I would. Ask why? You don't know me. You have no obligation to help me. Perhaps I find the injustice of your situation distasteful," he said. "Perhaps I dislike seeing James Hargrove escape consequences yet again. So I would be a means of settling a score." There was no accusation in her tone, merely inquiry. Alexander found himself unexpectedly admiring her perception. "Partly," he admitted, "but also an opportunity to silence gossip about both of us. Society has long pressured me to marry. A marriage, even one in name only, would provide you protection and give me respite from matchmaking mummers." Catherine considered this. What would such an arrangement entail? "We would marry quickly, with minimal ceremony. You would be the Duchess of Thornfield in title, and would be treated with all the respect that position commands. We would maintain separate bedchambers. After a suitable period, perhaps 2 years, we could arrange a quiet separation. You would retire to one of my country estates with a generous allowance, and during those 2 years, you would fulfill the social obligations of a duchess. Otherwise, your time would be your own." Catherine was silent for several moments. "May I have time to consider your offer?" Alexander hadn't expected hesitation. Most women would jump at the chance to become a duchess, even under such unusual terms. "You have until tomorrow morning," he said. "If you accept, we will be married by special license within the week." After Catherine departed, Alexander found himself surprisingly unsettled. She was not what he had expected, neither a weeping damsel nor an opportunist. Instead, she'd shown remarkable dignity and clear-headed pragmatism. The following morning, a letter arrived bearing Catherine's neat handwriting. It contained just 3 lines. "Your Grace, I accept your generous offer and the terms outlined. I promise to uphold the honor of your name and cause you no regrets for your kindness. Yours sincerely, Catherine Winters." True to his word, Alexander arranged everything with swift efficiency. 5 days later, in a private ceremony attended only by Lady Helena and his closest friend, the Earl of Westmoreland, Alexander Blackwood, Duke of Thornfield, married Catherine Winters as he placed his ring on her finger and spoke the vows he had sworn never to utter. Alexander told himself this was merely a business arrangement, a solution to both their problems. He was not breaking his vow never to love. This was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. What he couldn't explain was the strange sense of rightness he felt when he pronounced her his Duchess, shielding her with his name and title from a world that had been all too quick to cast her aside. The first weeks of their unusual marriage established a careful pattern. Alexander and Catherine maintained separate bedchambers, as agreed. They took breakfast separately, he in his study, she in the morning room. They conversed briefly about household matters or social engagements during dinner, always polite, never personal. To society, they presented a united front. Catherine performed her duties as Duchess of Thornfield flawlessly, organizing dinners, managing the household staff, and accompanying Alexander to the necessary social functions. Her quiet dignity and intelligence quickly earned the respect of even the most judgmental members of the Tondot. James Hargrove's slander withered in the face of the Duke of Thornfield's evident approval of his wife. Those who had been quick to condemn, Catherine now scrambled to secure invitations to her gatherings. The swift reversal of fortunes might have amused Alexander had he not witnessed the toll it took on Catherine. They smiled to my face and bowed deeply, these same people who believed the worst of me without question, she remarked one evening as their carriage returned from a ball. It was the most personal observation she had offered since their wedding. Society's memory is conveniently short when confronted with rank and wealth, Alexander replied. Catherine glanced at him, her violet eyes reflecting the passing street lamps. Does that bother you? Being respected more for your title than your character? The question startled him. Few people dared to speak so directly to the Duke of Thornfield. I've never considered it, he admitted. The title and I are inseparable. I disagree, she said softly. I've observed how differently you behave with your friend Lord Westmoreland compared to other peers. You value genuine connection over deference. Alexander studied her with new interest. You are more observant than most, Duchess. A slight smile touched her lips at the formal address. Books and wallflowers see much that others miss, Your Grace. Something shifted between them that night, a small crack in the careful wall of formality they had constructed. Alexander found himself noticing more about his wife in the days that followed, how she always thanked the servants by name, how she bit her lower lip when concentrating on correspondence, how she occasionally forgot herself and tucked her feet beneath her while reading in the library. For her part, Catherine seemed to grow more comfortable in his presence, venturing the occasional personal question or wry observation. She never intruded or pressed when he withdrew, respecting the boundaries of their arrangement with unfailing grace. One rainy afternoon, Alexander returned early from his club to find Catherine in the library, standing precariously on a ladder, reaching for a book on the highest shelf. Before he could warn her, she lost her balance. He moved instinctively, crossing the room in 3 long strides to catch her as she fell. For one suspended moment, they remained frozen. Catherine in his arms, her hands gripping his shoulders, their faces inches apart. Alexander became acutely aware of her scent, lavender and ink, the warmth of her body against his, the rapid pulse visible at her throat. I apologize, she murmured, color flooding her cheeks. I should have asked for assistance. Alexander set her gently on her feet, but found himself reluctant to step away. What book was worth risking your neck, Duchess? She smiled sheepishly. Milton's Paradise Lost. I was revisiting the passage about Eve. Eve's temptation? He asked. reaching easily to retrieve the volume. Her independence, Catherine corrected, accepting the book with a nod of thanks. Her desire to be recognized for herself, not merely as an extension of Adam. Alexander raised an eyebrow. A controversial reading. Perhaps, she acknowledged, but I've always thought Eve was unfairly maligned for simple curiosity and the desire for knowledge. The conversation shifted to literature, revealing Catherine's deep knowledge of works Alexander had only skimmed during his education. They debated interpretations of Shakespeare, discussed the merits of the Gothic novel, and found themselves surprised when the butler announced dinner. It was the first genuine conversation they had shared, and it changed something fundamental in their relationship. The careful formality remained, but alongside it grew a tentative friendship based on mutual respect and discovered common interests. 3 months into their marriage, an unexpected letter arrived from Alexander's estate manager at Thornfield Park, his ancestral home in Derbyshire. Serious flooding had damaged several tenant farms, requiring the Duke's immediate attention. "I must leave for Derbyshire tomorrow," he informed Catherine over dinner. "I may be gone for several weeks." "Of course," she replied. "Your tenants need you." Alexander hesitated, then added, "You should come with me." Catherine looked up in surprise. Their arrangement had never included travel to his estates. "Are you certain?" "You are the Duchess of Thornfield," he said simply. "The people of the estate should know their Duchess." The journey to Derbyshire took 2 days, during which Alexander found himself sharing more about his family history than he had intended. Catherine listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about the estate and its management. "My father believed that a landowner's primary duty was to those who worked his land," Alexander explained as their carriage approached Thornfield Park. "He taught me that wealth and title are responsibilities, not merely privileges." "He sounds like an honorable man," Catherine observed. "You must miss him greatly." Alexander nodded, surprised by how easy it was to discuss his father with her when he rarely spoke of him to anyone. "He was destroyed by my mother's betrayal. She abandoned us for her lover when I was 12. Father never recovered from the humiliation and heartbreak. And that's why you swore never to love," Catherine said softly, connecting pieces of information she had gathered over their months together. Alexander looked at her sharply. "Who told you that?" "No one had to tell me," she replied. "It's evident in how you hold yourself apart, even from those closest to you. You've built walls to prevent any possibility of experiencing your father's pain." Her perception unsettled him. "My private vows are hardly relevant to our arrangement," he said stiffly. Catherine turned her gaze to the passing landscape. "Forgive me. I've overstepped." The tension might have lingered had they not crested the final hill at that moment, revealing Thornfield Park in the valley below, a magnificent stone manor house surrounded by ancient oaks, with the damaged farms visible in the lower fields. "It's beautiful," Catherine breathed, momentarily distracted from their awkward exchange. Alexander followed her gaze, seeing his ancestral home through new eyes. "It is, isn't it? I sometimes forget having grown up here." The estate's staff lined up to greet their Duke and his new Duchess, curiosity evident on their faces. Alexander observed with approval how Catherine greeted each person individually, expressing genuine interest in their roles and families. That night, after they had retired to their separate chambers, Alexander stood at his window watching the moonlight silver the grounds. He found himself thinking of Catherine's words about his vow never to love, irritated by her presumption, yet unsettled by her accuracy. The following days established a new rhythm. Alexander spent his mornings surveying the damage and organizing repairs, while Catherine familiarized herself with the household and began visiting tenant families affected by the flooding. "Your wife brought medicine for my youngest and arranged for extra blankets," one tenant farmer reported to Alexander. "The Duchess has a kind heart, Your Grace." Similar reports reached him daily. Catherine had established a makeshift school for children whose village school had been damaged. She was organizing the estate's women to preserve food for the coming winter. She had discovered old furniture in the attics that could replace pieces ruined by floodwater. Alexander found himself watching Catherine with growing admiration. The quiet, dignified woman he had married was revealing herself to be compassionate, resourceful, and remarkably capable. The arrangement that had begun as a business transaction was becoming something he hadn't anticipated, a partnership. One evening, he returned from a long day overseeing repairs to find Catherine in the estate office, poring over account books. "With his steward, we've identified savings that could fund rebuilding the bridge without depleting the emergency reserves," she explained, showing him their calculations. The steward nodded respectfully. "Her Grace has a remarkable head for figures, Your Grace." After the man departed, Alexander studied Catherine with new appreciation. "You didn't mention your skill with estate management." She shrugged slightly. "My father was a vicar with a small living. I helped manage our household accounts from a young age. You continue to surprise me, Duchess," he said softly. Catherine met his gaze, a hint of vulnerability in her expression. "Is that a good thing, Your Grace?" "I'm beginning to think it is." That night, Alexander found himself unable to sleep, his thoughts circling around the woman in the adjacent chamber, the woman who was technically his wife, yet remained largely a mystery. A woman who had accepted an unusual arrangement with dignity, who had transformed from a ruined companion to a respected duchess through sheer force of character, who was now winning the hearts of his tenants and staff with her genuine concern for their welfare, a woman who, he realized with a jolt of surprise, was gradually finding her way past walls he had believed impenetrable. The revelation should have alarmed him. Instead, as dawn broke over Thornfield Park, Alexander found himself contemplating a possibility he had long since dismissed, that perhaps, in shielding Catherine Winters with his name, he had unwittingly opened himself to the very thing he had sworn to avoid. Catherine Winters had never expected happiness. When she accepted the Duke of Thornfield's proposal, she had hoped merely for safety and the restoration of her good name. The arrangement was logical, pragmatic, qualities she had always valued, above sentiment. 6 months into their marriage of convenience, Catherine found herself in the unexpected position of wanting more than their careful agreement allowed. Living at Thornfield Park had changed something between them. The Duke, Alexander, as she had begun to think of him privately, had revealed glimpses of the man behind the title, his dry humor, his sense of justice, his unwavering commitment to those under his protection. She had not planned to care for him. It complicated everything. On a crisp autumn morning, Catherine rode alongside Alexander as they surveyed the completed repairs to tenant farms. The flooding damage had been considerable, but under his direction, the community had recovered remarkably well. "Your tenants adore you," she observed as they passed a farmer who bowed deeply, genuine respect in his weathered face. Alexander shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. "I merely fulfill my duty to them." Many landowners wouldn't consider rebuilding cottages and replacing livestock a duty, Catherine replied. They view tenants as sources of income, not people deserving of care. "My father taught me differently," he said simply. They crested a hill, and Alexander reined his horse to a stop, gesturing toward a small stone church nestled among ancient yews. "My parents are buried there," he said quietly. "I haven't visited. Since we arrived." Catherine studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw. "Would you like to go now? I could accompany you, or wait here if you prefer privacy." He considered for a moment. "Come with me." The churchyard was peaceful, fallen leaves carpeting the paths between weathered gravestones. Alexander led her to an imposing monument bearing the Blackwood family crest. He stood silently before his father's grave, his expression unreadable. "He would have liked you," he said finally. "My father valued intelligence and kindness above beauty or accomplishments." "And your mother?" Catherine asked gently. Alexander's expression hardened. "She abandoned everything that should have mattered for a fleeting passion. Her grave is here, but she died in Italy with her lover." Catherine absorbed this information, understanding better the roots of his vow never to love. "Do you truly believe love is always destructive?" she asked, voicing the question that had lingered since their uncomfortable conversation in the carriage. "I believe it makes fools of even the wisest people," he replied. "My father was a brilliant man, respected throughout England. Love reduced him to a shadow, unable to eat or sleep, dying by inches of humiliation and betrayal." "That wasn't love that destroyed him," Catherine said carefully. "It was betrayal. They aren't the same thing." Alexander turned to her, his expression challenging. "Aren't they? Without love, there can be no betrayal. Without attachment, no loss. Without rain, no floods," Catherine countered. "Would you eliminate all rain to prevent the possibility of damage? What of the growth and life it brings?" He studied her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "You speak like someone who has known love without betrayal, Catherine. Was there someone before?" She shook her head. "No, but I observed my parents' marriage, a true partnership based on deep affection and respect. When my father died, my mother grieved terribly, yet she always said she wouldn't trade her pain for having loved him less." Alexander was silent, absorbing her words. Finally, he offered his arm. "We should return. The weather is turning." Dark clouds had indeed gathered while they spoke. They had barely mounted their horses when the first heavy drops fell, quickly becoming a downpour. Alexander pointed to a gamekeeper's cottage nearby. "We can shelter there until it passes." They reached the cottage drenched despite their short gallop. The small building was unoccupied, but maintained for exactly such emergencies, with dry firewood stacked beside a small hearth. Alexander quickly built a fire while Catherine found blankets in a chest. The single room was spare but clean, furnished with simple wooden chairs and a narrow cot. "Your hair is dripping," Alexander observed, his own dark locks plastered to his forehead. Catherine unwound her sodden riding hat, releasing a cascade of wet chestnut hair down her back. Alexander's eyes widened slightly at the sight. She had never worn her hair loose in his presence before. Self-consciously, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and moved closer to the fire. "How long do you think the storm will last?" "An hour, perhaps more," he replied, removing his wet coat and hanging it near the flames. "We're fortunate to have shelter." They sat in companionable silence as the fire slowly chased the chill from their bodies. Outside, rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the hills. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Alexander said suddenly. Catherine tensed, fearing he had somehow sensed her growing feelings and wished to reinforce their boundaries. "Yes. When we return to London, perhaps we should reconsider certain aspects." "Which aspects?" she asked carefully. Alexander hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Our separate lives. It's necessary for appearances that we share more time together in public." "Of course," Catherine agreed, trying to hide her disappointment at the practical nature of his suggestion. "Whatever you think best." "That's not—" He broke off, frustrated. "I'm not expressing myself well." "It's all right," she assured him. "I understand our marriage requires adjustments for social appearances." "This isn't about appearances," he said abruptly, rising to pace the small room. "It's about—" He stopped, again, seeming to struggle with words that normally came so easily to him. Catherine watched him, confused by his uncharacteristic agitation. Alexander! It was the first time she had used his given name aloud. He turned to her, surprise and something else flickering across his features. "I find myself—" he began, then shook his head. "These past months at Thornfield Park have been different than I expected." "Different how?" she pressed gently. He met her gaze directly. "I've enjoyed your company, Catherine, your perspective, your presence, far more than I anticipated when we made our arrangement." Catherine's heart stuttered. "I've enjoyed your company as well," she admitted softly. "Have you?" There was genuine question in his voice, as though he couldn't quite believe it. "Very much." She gathered her courage. "In fact, I've found myself wishing our arrangement allowed for more." The silence that followed was charged with possibility. Alexander moved slowly to kneel before her chair, bringing their faces level. "What more would you wish for, Catherine?" Her courage nearly failed her, but the openness in his expression gave her strength. "A true marriage," she whispered, "not just in name." Alexander reached out tentatively, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. "I swore never to love," he reminded her, his voice low. "I made that vow when I was 12 years old, watching my father waste away from heartbreak." "I'm not asking you to break your vow," Catherine said gently, "only to consider that perhaps it was made by a wounded child who couldn't see that there are different kinds of love, that not all love destroys." His fingers lingered against her cheek. "And if I can't offer what you deserve—" "You already offer me protection, respect and kindness," she replied. "That's more than many wives receive, even in so-called love matches." Alexander's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her, eyes seeking permission. Catherine answered by leaning forward slightly, eliminating the last hesitation between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the careful exploration of unfamiliar territory. When they separated, Alexander's expression held wonder and confusion in equal measure. "I don't know if I can be what you need," he admitted rawly. "I've kept myself from feeling for so long. I'm not certain I remember how." Catherine took his hands in hers. "Perhaps we can discover together, day by day, with no promises beyond honesty." The storm passed eventually, allowing them to return to Thornfield Park, where concerned servants fussed over their damp clothes and chilled skin. If anyone noticed the changed atmosphere between the Duke and Duchess, they were too discreet to comment. That night, Alexander knocked softly on the connecting door between their chambers. When Catherine opened it, he stood uncertainly on the threshold. "I'm not ready to make grand declarations," he said quietly, "but I would like to try, being more than strangers who share a name." Catherine smiled, her heart full. "I would like that too." In the weeks that followed, they established a new pattern. They still maintained separate bedchambers, but now they often lingered in conversation before retiring. They shared breakfast and discussed their days. Alexander sought Catherine's counsel on estate matters, while she encouraged him to speak of his childhood memories, both painful and precious. Slowly, carefully, they built something neither had expected from their pragmatic arrangement, a foundation of genuine affection, respect, and growing desire. When they returned to London for the season, society noticed the change immediately. The Duke of Thornfield, long known for his cool reserve, now attended to his wife with evident attentiveness. The Duchess, for her part, bloomed under his regard, her quiet dignity enhanced by newfound confidence. At a ball hosted by Lady Helena, who watched their evolution with pleased surprise, James Hargrove had the misfortune to cross their path. He blanched at the sight of Catherine on Alexander's arm, clearly shocked by her transformation from ruined companion to respected duchess. Hargrove, Alexander acknowledged coldly. The man bowed awkwardly. Your Grace and Duchess, you look... Well, thank you, Catherine replied serenely. Marriage agrees with me. Alexander's hand tightened possessively on hers as they moved away. I wanted to strike him, he muttered. I prefer your protection to his punishment, Catherine replied. You've given me something far more valuable than revenge, a future. Later that evening, as they danced together, Alexander drew her slightly closer than propriety strictly allowed. I have something to confess, he murmured. That sounds ominous, she teased. I believe I'm failing spectacularly at keeping my vow. Catherine's heart quickened. Which vow would that be? The one about never loving? Precisely that one. His eyes held hers, serious despite his light tone. It seems that in shielding you with my name, I've somehow exposed my heart to the very thing I swore to avoid. And how do you feel about that failure? She asked softly. Alexander's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. Surprisingly relieved. It appears my 12-year-old self was rather dramatically mistaken about love's nature. How so? He believed. Love could only destroy. Alexander's hand tightened on hers. He never considered it might rebuild what was broken. As the music swelled around them, Catherine leaned slightly closer. Are you saying what I think you're saying, Your Grace? I believe I am, Duchess, he replied, his voice low and certain. I love you, Catherine Blackwood, not because our arrangement required it, but because your courage, your kindness, and your remarkable heart made it impossible not to. Catherine blinked back, sudden tears. And I love you, Alexander. I think I have since you offered me your name, when all others turned away. Then it seems, he said as the dance brought them together once more, that we have successfully transformed our business arrangement into something far more valuable. Indeed, Catherine agreed, her heart full to bursting. Though I believe this transformation is just beginning. As the season progressed, society whispered about the obvious devotion between the Duke of Thornfield and his bride. Some recalled the scandal of her past, but found it difficult to reconcile with the confident Duchess, who now moved through ballrooms on her husband's arm, clearly adored by the man who had once sworn never to love. Few knew the truth, that in saving Catherine with his name, Alexander had ultimately saved himself from a lifetime of isolation. That in protecting her, he had found something he never thought to seek, a heart that matched his own in strength, integrity, and capacity for love. 1 year to the day after their pragmatic wedding, the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield renewed their vows in the small church at Thornfield Park. This time, there was no special license, no hasty ceremony, no business arrangement, only two people who had found in each other the courage to believe that love, rather than destroying them, might be their greatest protection of all. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected love and second chances, please subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical romances. Our next story features a spirited governess who catches the eye of a brooding viscount with a mysterious past. Subscribe now to make sure you don't miss any of our romantic adventures.